Hey, today I wanted to talk about a miniseries that it finished a few months ago, 3 months ago, but I just found a chance to finish it called Crimson Cage, The Crimson Cage. It's from AWA Upshot. This is the first books I ever bought from this publisher, and it's written by John Lees and with art and by Alex Cormack, colors by Ashley Cormack. And it's essentially a story of 1980s pro wrestling in the territory days before WWE took over everything, but it's also Macbeth. It's a tragedy, a Shakespearean tragedy. Let me get into it a little bit more to make some sense out of that. Now, generally, I don't like wrestling comics. I like pro wrestling. I mean, yes, I understand it's scripted. I understand that it's not real. But I always say that if you actually watch enough pro wrestling, and then when you got good angles, you actually get an idea of storytelling, because basically it's the oldest story known to man. It's the battle between good and evil, where evil triumphs often, good eventually triumphs, but like in real life, it's not 50-50. Evil gets away with a lot of stuff. And so this is set in the early 1980s in a fictitious territory in Louisiana. And in this first issue, there's a long discussion about tragedies during Shakespeare time, because when they would promote these books, the plays, they would say it's a tragedy. So you knew it was a tragedy, but you're more interested in like what happens, who are the characters, what's their motivations, that kind of thing. So you knew it was going to end badly, for some people at least, but how it ended badly was the key. So again, this is a story set in the early 1980s. And the one thing I don't like about wrestling comics in general is that either the stories aren't good, or the art is either really loose and sloppy, or it's like people are drawn like too chiseled. These wrestlers look like guys you would find in the early 80s, where they're built, they're strong. Some guys are just big old guys, muscular. And the story is basically about Chuck. Chuck and his wife are a wrestling team. She's his manager. And he's desperate to become a champion. And one night in the Louisiana Road, he encounters like the three witches. And they tell him, if you do this, you can be champion. If you do that, you can be champion. And it's like Macbeth, it's the long, slow descent into madness. I love these covers, by the way, of Chuck as he progresses. I'm not going to spoil everything, but as he becomes champion, and then the price that he has to pay and the things that he's asked to do in order to keep that championship, and how paranoid he gets about keeping it, and how it impacts his wife, and how his wife starts losing her sanity. You see, she starts off as his blonde valet, his blonde, attractive ballet, and then here she takes this very, wouldn't say goth because the 80s, but the black makeup, the black hair teased out, the black uniform. And so it's very subtle. And also the things that he does, he actually commits in order to kind of keep his spot. And it's just really well written. If you've ever seen wrestling from the 80s, 70s, and 80s, I would say before WWE took over everything, you would really see a lot of the analogies, like, okay, this wrestler's like this wrestler, and a lot of these plots and subplots are things that you would see. But there's also a Macbeth element. So someone that Chuck kills, he sees his ghost in the stands with the fans, but he's not really there. And then there's these emissaries of the people that actually gave him what he wanted. So he's sort of like a pawn for these emissaries, and they don't say it's Satan, but you realize later on it is Satan. That basically he's kind of sold his soul. And as you get into it more and more, there's more madness, and also there's, like Macbeth, there's these scenes where he'll get prophecies, and then these prophecies sound crazy, but then they actually happen, like in Macbeth, like in the prophecy that only when the forest moves, I forget the name of the forest, there's three things that happen, and then later on, these guys cut out these trees and they're in the trees and they move them, so the forest is moving. Again, the art fits great. A lot of the coloring is dark. It's dark when it has to be. It's bright when it has to be. It's a good story, very well written, good characters, and there's even like this gimmick within a gimmick where Chuck, who's going insane, starts giving these promos talking about the demons have told him what the prophecies are, and no, as long as I do what they say, I'll always be champion. And everybody's thinking he's just making this crazy stuff up, but it's really true. Like Macbeth, where they start talking about these things, but they're really true, but they sound mad, and they are mad. So it's like that borderline of, they're mad, but how mad are they? So I'm not going to spoil the ending. He looks like Bam Bam Gordy from the Freebirds of the 80s. Rest in peace. So the last match ends in this cage match. And so they acknowledge it's scripted. There is a commissioner, there's a person that runs the promotion. They say, okay, well, Chuck, you're going to have to do this, you're going to do that. So it's not like they're pretending it's real. It's not real. But again, it's a really good story, and I believe the trade paperback is really cheap. I think it's like $9.99. So if you're a fan of wrestling or you're a fan of Shakespearean tragedies or both, I would check this out. This is really well written. It's well made. I really enjoy this. This is probably the only wrestling story. I don't read a lot of them because they usually disappoint, but this is like the first one that I've read that I'm like, okay, this really did work, and it really did give you the payoff that you needed in a story to make it effective. The characters are well written. It's all dialogue based, but enough is given about the characters so you understand who they are. The evil people are the ones they're evil. Like a good wrestling angle, and the good people, you can see they're good. Again, it's very, very well done. I'm looking forward to finding more of their work, and I may consider getting more from this line because this is a really good comic. Anyway, just wanted to share it. Again, the trade is pretty cheap from what I understand. I don't mind because I bought the single issues. I support it. This is a really good book. And again, here, like, you have a lot of darkness, and look, here it's bright when it has to be bright. And like I said, like, this guy is big and strong, burly, but it's not like, Rob Liefeld's, ridiculous kind of proportions. But, back in the day, this is what your top wrestlers look like. They look like guys that could literally beat you up. So check it out. I give it a really high recommendation. I want to thank Jonathan Thompson, who goes by Space Station Z on Instagram. He's a writer. He's got a crowdfunding for his book, Night of the Comet, hardcover. He's a wrestling fan too. He's the one that told me about this book, and I really actually liked it a lot. So, as I always say, it's good to have good friends who have good taste in comics because they'll point you to the good stuff. Anyway, good night.